Welcome, everyone, to Buddha's Center. So wonderful to be with you all tonight, once again, to discuss the stages of the path to enlightenment. Let's begin by setting a motivation, because this is a Mahayana teaching, because we're all here to try to figure out how to remove our own suffering and how to achieve the most amount of happiness possible. And we recognize, because we study the Mahayana, that the only way that we can do that is to include all sentient beings in our motivation, include all sentient beings in wanting them to have happiness and the causes of happiness, just like we do, and wanting them to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, like we want. So we begin with this motivation where we say, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And this is the most incredible motivation that anyone can have when anyone does anything. If we're motivated by bodhicitta, the mind that wishes to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, the mind that seeks enlightenment for the benefit of others, as Lord Maitreya says in the Abhisama Alamkara, if we have this motivation, this is how we can truly fulfill all of our own needs and all sentient beings' needs, by becoming bodhisattvas and by engaging in a pathway which leads to the removal of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience that keep us from experience complete freedom from suffering and bliss, but also keep us from being the most reliable guides in the universe. So let's begin this teaching by setting our motivation to become Buddhas for the sake of all sentient beings. We're here to listen to these teachings, to be able to absorb them, to be able to analyze them, to be able to meditate upon them so that we can become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So sit with this idea for a moment. And with this motivation of wanting to become a Buddha, imagine now that we invite every single sentient being here in the universe to be able to share this blessing, to be able to share these teachings with them, to be able to unlock this self-cherishing attitude that's caused us so much pain and suffering, and turn it towards others, turn it towards a other cherishing attitude, because that's exactly what the Buddha does day and night, spontaneously helps others, because he or she's the most reliable guide in the universe, because the self-cherishing attitude isn't there and the self-grasping ignorance isn't there, and this allows his or her mind to move freely to all sentient beings. So just like the Buddha can do that, imagine that we're doing that right now, and we invite all sentient beings to be here with us, beginning with those beings who we find closest to us, those beings that we have no problem saying, oh, I want them to have happiness, I want them to be free from suffering. And then we move on to those strangers, those beings that we see, that we maybe see in the supermarket, that we see walk by our house, walking their dog, those bees that are flying around, those bugs, those beetles, those beings that we consider strangers. And we imagine that we're inviting all of them here, those beings, and we're wanting them to have happiness, the cause of happiness, and be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And then imagine we're bringing those difficult people here, those people that we don't maybe consider enemies, but we consider people we don't want anywhere near us, those people that cause our mind difficulty when they're near us, those people that we have a hard time thinking about helping or wanting them to have happiness. And as we bring those types of beings here, and we imagine that we're bringing them here to this teaching, see how our mind reacts with those specific individuals. And if our mind has a reaction that says, oh, I can bring everybody but him or her into this merit, into this bodhicitta field. I just have trouble, with this one individual or these types of individuals, bringing them into this meditation. Recognize that this is one of the greatest gifts that you've ever received. You've looked at your mind and you've distinguished exactly what leads to your suffering over and over again. And that's this biased attitude that's willing to help some and not help others, that's unwilling to recognize that every single sentient being in the universe has been our mothers, has been our closest loved one, and has cherished us in so many different ways. And it points out to us when we have difficulty with certain individuals, and we have difficulty when we're doing our meditation and bringing them into our practice. It points to the fact that we haven't realized the compassion that we think we've realized. We aren't as loving as we think we are, because the way that the Buddha loves, the way that the Buddha has compassion, is in an unbiased way. So we need to lay the tracks within our mind for that non-biased way of thinking. And when we look at the first step of equanimity, when we start to do the 7-point cause and effect practice for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, we go through this process of looking at our loved ones and seeing how our reaction is to them, and looking at strangers and seeing our reaction to them, and looking at our enemies and seeing the reaction to them, and seeing our attachment to friends and our aversion towards our enemies, and seeing how we react in a way that just disregards strangers. We see our mind's reaction, and this allows us to use the mirror of the Dharma to see if we're making progress. And the more and more we do this on a daily basis, if we actually engage in meditation, if these aren't just mere words, if these aren't just something that we've read, we found interesting, we'll see that those beings we find difficulty with, those beings that we have a hard time bringing into our meditation and wishing they have happiness and the causes of happiness, and wishing that they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, become easier to deal with, not only in our meditation, but in our daily lives. And we might even find a complete shift in our attitude towards them, which then creates a complete shift in our experience with them. So let's now lay those tracks and imagine that we're bringing every single sentient being in the universe here. And I'll read some verses of auspiciousness from the King of Prayers, the Samantabhadra dedication, the Sanchim Mulang, for auspiciousness. Lai ke dan lu dan no jing ke drubun da dan mi ke nan da droa gonji dra nan ji tsamba tan che ke du da ji chu ten do. In the language of gods, nagas, and yaksas, in the language of demons and of humans too, and however many kinds of speech there may be, I shall proclaim the Dharma in the language of all. So now imagine all sentient beings have been brought here. You're learning how to share. You're learning how to, this gift you've been given by lamas and by this incredible lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni through all of the Nalanda tradition, through all the old Kadampa tradition and all the 4 Tibetan lineages, and all the way to us, from the holy beings like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche. This holy lineage of Dharma has come into our laps, and we have a way that we can actually transcend our suffering. Our liberation depends upon us. It's our mind that has to be matured. It's our mind that has to have the actual afflictions removed, separated from it. This isn't something that someone else can do for us. And now we're all here learning exactly what it is we need to do to our minds. All sentient beings are here, and to be able to learn in their own individual languages, in their own individual aptitudes, exactly how to transform from their state to a state of perfection where there's perfect love and compassion, perfect power, perfect wisdom, perfect skillful means, perfect reliability, perfect teaching skills, an omniscient mind that just cares for others, knows reality and diversity in a way that allows him or her to be completely beneficial and helpful, whereas others have impediments to that ability to be the most caring, loving, compassionate, able beings that exist. So we're all here tonight to learn how to transform into the reliable guide. Just as the Buddha, as Dignaga says, the one who transformed into the reliable guide, we too can transform into that reliable guide by generating altruism, by generating compassion, by generating what the Buddha generated in order to transform into a reliable guide. He was motivated by altruism to benefit sentient beings. And by that, by dependence upon this motivation that we set up, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May I engage in this work. May I engage in this practice in order to be the most reliable guide in the universe. In dependence upon that motivation, the Buddha, before becoming a Buddha, Buddha Shakyamuni was able to transform into that state where there was a freedom from the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience by relying on a mental basis of bodhicitta, a main mind that wished to become a Buddha, wished to achieve a state of perfection for the sake of others, wished to cherish others more than himself, wished to take on their suffering, wished to give the complete love, had this idea of taking it upon him or herself, the task of freeing each and every single sentient being in a non-biased way, as we said before, from suffering and bringing them to a state of complete bliss and happiness. And by doing so, that would then allow them to be transformed into reliable guides as well and become helpers to everyone in the universe. And we all will become aids to all beings in the universe if we rely upon these teachings. Not only will we fulfill all of our wants and needs, all we want is to be happy, all we want is to be free from suffering. Not only will we be able to do that, because that's our kind of entrance right after the medium scope into the Mahayana. I haven't even fulfilled all of my own needs. Oh, in order to do so, I must become enlightened for the sake of others. I must learn how to see others as important as me, and then learn how to cherish them more than myself, and actually exchange the attitude that cherishes myself more than anyone else in the universe to an idea that would put myself behind all other beings in the universe and would cherish them. And by doing so, by learning how to change this attitude, which cherishes myself, into an attitude that cherishes others, I'll be able to actually transform into the reliable guide the way that Buddha did, by relying on a path of liberation and a path of ripening. So with that in mind, this is what we've brought all sentient beings here to witness. Now, in the 7-point Vairakana posture, which serves as a best basis for our mind to be able to get into the clearest state possible, the best basis for everything to align in our body in the best way, all of our channels and of our winds, and the blood to flow in the best possible way. We know there's a very large mind-body connection, and when we put our body into a specific posture, it alerts our mind, hey, this is an important thing we're about to do, A. B, it sets our body up in the most conducive way to sit for long periods of time. C, it also is inspiring for others when we're imagining that we're bringing in the bodhicitta field. We're imagining we're bringing in all sentient beings. We're imagining they're being inspired by this posture in our daily lives. When we're able to show people this posture, we're able to inspire them. And it sets it up so that the physical basis is in such a way that our mind can be checked, because we know that we've done everything we can physically to get into a position to set ourselves up to then turn inward into our mind and start to try to mature it, and start to try to work with the Buddha nature that we have. We have this mind that's empty of inherent existence. Therefore, it's not stuck. It's in the nature of clear light and unsullied, and it just merely at this point is sullied. And the emptiness of the maturing Buddha nature, the proliferating Buddha nature, is the natural Buddha nature that we have in common with everyone who has a mind, that all of our minds, including the Buddhas, are empty of inherent existence. So therefore, our mind is only reflecting that which it's projecting. And if then I can mature my mind to the point where it no longer projects distorted reality and no longer projects any even subtle form of self-cherishing attitude, then my mind can be pure like the Buddha's mind, and then I can be the most reliable guide in the universe. And my mind has the ability to mature because I know there's states of mind that I have, all of the basic states of mind that we say that the Buddha has. I have wisdom in my mind. I have love in my mind. I have compassion in my mind. I have all of these states in my mind. They just haven't matured in a way that to their most potential. They haven't been perfected because I haven't worked on perfecting them. The Buddha worked on perfecting his or her mind, therefore matured it to the state of perfection. I haven't, since beginningless time, worked enough on my mind, so I haven't matured it to perfection. But my mind isn't stuck the way that it is right now, and that's the beautiful part of my mind. That's the beautiful part of all sentient beings' minds that we've invited here, so that we haven't invited him here to say, here, you could take a gamble. Here's a chance. If you try this, it might work. We've invited them here to do exactly what it is that they will all need to do in order to mature their minds, like I can mature my mind to the state of perfection, because my mind's empty of inherent existence, and my mind has qualities that can be matured and can be great and made greater and greater and greater, to the point where those qualities of my mind are the ever-present qualities of my mind, And those distorted things, those defilements are removed, have been extracted, have been distilled, and the only thing there is to know and reflect from there on are the perfect qualities that I've produced in dependence upon a path, in dependence upon relying on the path of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and no more learning. I'll be able to mature my mind the same way Buddha did, the one who transformed into a reliable guide. He wasn't the reliable guide. I'm not the reliable guide. I can transform into the reliable guide because the ingredients of my mind, which is just a knowing, reflecting illuminator, is the same as the Buddha's mind. And it's just the contents are different. And the contents aren't inherently a certain way. So therefore, mine can change. My mind hasn't been distilled. And because the Buddha's mind has been distilled, there's nothing for it to do but go from bliss to bliss to bliss, compassion to compassion to compassion, spontaneous love to spontaneous love to spontaneous love. I have all of these mix-up in my mind that make me not go from great state to great state to great state, because I have things which cause ungreat states. All phenomena arise from causes. The causes are taught by the Tathagata. The cessation of causes as well are taught by the great seer. The cessation of the causes of suffering have been realized by the Buddha. The cessation of the causes of not being the reliable guide have been realized by the Buddha. The cessation of the causes for me not being the most reliable guide, for the cessation of the causes that make me not the most reliable guide haven't occurred. So when the cessation of the causes that make me not the most reliable guide occur, I'll become the most reliable guide. So if I made that confusing, I apologize. But the Buddha has ceased the causes that make him or her not the reliable guide. I haven't ceased the causes that make me not the reliable guide. Therefore, I'm not the reliable guide. The Buddha is the reliable guide. But reliability is within my reach because my mind isn't stuck, because I can transform by generating the causes and conditions that make me the reliable guide in my mind stream. So with that being said, let's then imagine that we invite the entire merit field here. We're in the 7-point Vairocana posture, and that we're inspiring sentient beings. And now let's invite all the beings that we will need to connect with in order to remove the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience, to learn how to do so, to learn what the ripening paths are, to learn what the liberating paths are. We imagine that we invite all of those beings now into the space in front of us. Imagine that they're just an arm's length away. They're right there, just a full body prostration length away. We imagine that all the enlightened beings begin to fill in the space in front of us. We imagine Buddha Shakyamuni. We imagine His Holiness the Dalai Lama is on a Vajra throne, very secure, smiling, looking into our eyes with love and compassion. The wish-fulfilling jewel, the Buddha of compassion, who's in our world right now to guide us. We're so fortunate that he's here, and he's presented us with this beautiful tradition, and he's spread this beautiful tradition around the world that allows us to learn how to be free. Imagining holy beings like Khenso Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, my root lama, many of our root lamas, so kind year after year to give us instructions on the stages of the path to enlightenment. We're so fortunate that he was in our world and that he gave us these teachings. Imagining Geshe Lobsang Gompo, Demo Loche Rinpoche, Khenso Lobsang Gyatso, all of these holy beings, any being you consider a highly enlightened being, a being who's removed the afflictive obstructions, the obstructions to omniscience. We're imagining them in this way. We're imagining all of these beings to be Buddhas. We're imagining that our lamas are inseparable from the deities. So we're imagining all of these holy beings, imagining Geshe Dorje Damdula, imagining Umsala Geshe Aga, imagining Jeffrey Hopkins, imagining all these Lama Zopa Rinpoche, all these holy beings, Genpo Dendrapa Rinpoche, all these holy beings that are here in this world to guide us, that only care about teaching us exactly what we need to do to be able to realize the states of mind that they've realized. And they're so kind to come here and share this with us. Imagining the beings of the extensive deeds lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Maitreya Sangha and Vasubandhu and Dignaga and Dharmakirti and Vimuktasena and Haribhadra and Shakyaprabha and Gunaprabha and Lama Salimpa and Lord Atisha Drontompa. Imagine them all there, right there in the space in front of you. We're so fortunate that the grounds and paths have all been taught and the Vinaya has been taught, and it's been expressed to us because of the kindness of Maitreya passing it to a Sangha, how to generate the mind that aspires to enlightenment through the 7-point cause and effect, 7-point cause and effect instruction for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. We're so fortunate to have these instructions in our world. Rejoice in this fact. Rejoice in the idea that we can achieve a complete freedom from suffering and we can end all imperfect states of happiness by relying upon the path that these beings have been so kind to come and show us. Imagine the beings of the profound view lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri and Nagarjuna and Buddha Palita, Arya Deva and Chandrakirti and Shantideva and Baba Vega and Chandraashita and Kamala Shila, and again imagining Lama Salimpa and Lord Atisha and Drontompa. All these holy beings, the holy beings of the lineage of blessings passed down from Vajradhara to Saraha and Matripa, Tilopa, Naropa, Lotsawa Marpa and Jay Milarepa and Jay Gampopa. All these holy beings right here in the space in front of you. These are the beings who are our spiritual family. If we've read the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, we've been influenced by all of these beings, and we make aspirations that in all of our lives, we're never separated from these pure teachings that these great Indian pandits have given and these great Tibetan masters have given, all passed down in an unbroken lineage from our master, from our Lord Buddha Shakyamuni, who was so kind to come 2,600 years ago to unveil the truth. Imagine Drontompa passing the Lamrim lineage down to the old Kadampa, the 3 old Kadampa lineages. Imagine now the holy beings of the Nyingma, Padmasambhava, and Longchenpa and Mipam, Sakya, Sakya Pandita, Sachen Kunga Nimpo, Sakya Randawa, the Kaju lineage, imagining Jay Gampopa and all the Karmapas, the Galupa lineage, Jay Rinpoche, Lama Tsongkhapa, and Kirtapje and Jelsapje, imagining Basuchuji Jetson, Panchen Sonandrapa, Jayan Sheba, Pubajo, Jetsumpa, imagining Gondran Jimmy Wampo, Janja Rupi Dorje, the 7th Dalai Lama, all these holy beings in the space in front of us, all the beings of the highest Yoga Tantra, Performance Tantra, and Action Tantra, imagining all the 35 Buddhas and all the protector deities are in the space in front of us. Now we know that every being in the universe is with us. Sentient beings are all here, learning exactly what they need to know in order to remove the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. And all of the beings who've done so are here. And we're connecting with them to be able to progress on the path, to be able to learn more and more about what we need to know personally, because it's our mind that needs to be separated from the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. We need to be our own discipline master, as Geshe Umzala Aga says to me over and over and over again. Don't worry about others. Don't worry about, you're not everyone's discipline master. You're your own discipline master. It's our mind that needs to be separated from these obstacles. And we're so fortunate that we have beings that have come to us to show us in a personally prescribed way. I know that Khenso Geshe Wandak was so kind to personalize his instructions to each one of us in such a way that would allow us to evolve our minds little by little by little. And I know in my case, in such a way that that little tiny bit of evolution kept me coming and kept me believing that this was an actual path, that this was something that would work, because I saw it working in my mind, and not because of laziness, because of on a daily basis trying to know a little bit more and a little bit more. Thank you so much, Khenso Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, for being such an incredible guide for almost 25 years. Now, with all these beings that we're so connected to and all the sentient beings we rely upon, we will rely upon in order to become a Buddha, we know that sentient beings are just as kind as the Buddhas. In that way that we rely upon them, we learn how to recognize they're as important as we are. We learn how to recognize the downfalls of the self-cherishing attitudes and the benefit of cherishing others. We learn how to take on their suffering and give them our happiness. We learn how to actually exchange this idea that we cherish ourselves, this feeling that we have that's so strong about the way that we care for ourselves. we learn how to just switch that and make that feeling that strong for others, recognizing more and reinforcing this idea, this great kindness that they've shown us, and then taking on this idea that we must help them and knowing we must become a Buddha to help them. So as we started the practice today, may I become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, Abhisama Alam Kara, the wish for enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, this beautiful, beautiful mind that's like an atomic bomb against all of the negativities, as that Shantideva says, there's just nothing as strong as this mind when it comes to opening the pathway to being able to move to Buddhahood, to being able to move all of the things out of the way that are needed to see emptiness and experience ultimate bodhicitta. With that being said, now we imagine this merit field we're imagining in front of us that's actually here. Whenever we call the merit field, they arrive. We just have karmic obstacles. We're not able to see them. Jay Rinpoche, Lama Tsongkhapa was able to just kind of call the merit field and have them assemble one by one and come into, right into the space in front of him. And eventually our obstacles will be removed. Eventually we'll have accumulated enough merit. We'll have been able to see our teacher as inseparable from the deity enough. We'll be able to have enough wisdom arisen from hearing, analysis, and meditation to be able to have those veils removed and see these deities right in front of us, the way that Lama Tsongkhapa did. Unfortunately, I haven't arrived at such a state yet, but I've known beings who apparently have, and this is inspiring to me. So with this being said, imagine we're all sentient beings are here and we're transported to Rajagriha to Vulture Peak Mountain, and that we're there and we see this incredible blessing taking place of the Buddha and Shariputra and Chenrezig, and this play, this dance of emptiness that goes on, where Buddha Shakyamuni teaches that definitive truth, the absence of inherent existence of all phenomena, and presents it with this hidden basis of the five paths presented within it, this hidden, vast teaching found within the mantra of the Heart Sutra, within the Heart Sutra itself, but also in a very, very subtle way hidden within the Heart Sutra mantra, the five paths of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and no more learning. So we find this hidden within there, but explicitly what this is teaching is the lack of inherent existence of all phenomena. And this is the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, where we find this to be the definitive teaching. And interpretable teachings are the first and the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, where we need to add this second turning of the wheel of Dharma to be able to interpret them in a correct final way, to be able to understand the teachings in a final way. So with that being said, imagine we're at Vulture Peak Mountain. Imagine that we're hearing the Buddha through his blessing speak through Chenrezig and Avalokiteshvara about the lack of inherent existence of all phenomena, that not only is the self of person empty of selfless of permanent unitary independent selfless of autonomous substantial reality, but the Buddha then comes to say that nothing inherently exists. There is nothing in the universe that's findable, permanent or impermanent, that inherently exists. And the Madhyamaka Prasangika is the only one who at the end of the day says that ultimately and conventionally nothing inherently exists. So the Buddha came and taught this view at the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, and then it was expounded as prophesied by Arya Nagarjuna hundreds of years later. So here we see this explanation that no phenomena has inherent existence because it dependently originates. And we see that when we look at the four essentials, just one way of understanding emptiness, there's four modes of production, not arisen from self, other, both, or causelessly. But then there's also the four essentials. And here we can see that what's the object of negation? What is the Buddha trying to tell us is not? There's a lot of no's in this sutra. There's no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. A lot of no's. What is the Buddha trying to say? There is not. There seems to be a negation of something. So when we look at the four essentials, we see that the first thing is the object of negation, inherent existence, something that can stand on its own, an object that can stand on its own, something with objective existence, an object that exists right within itself, and an object that has its own, established by its own defining characteristics, established by way of its own character. So the object of negation is that inherent existence. So if an object inherently exists, if a car inherently exists, then that car must be able to be findable. This inherently existent car must be findable. And when we start to look at different ways that it could be found, there's only two. It can be found within the parts of the car or something separate from the parts of the car. And when you begin this analysis, you say, okay, the object of negation is an inherently existent car. Well, I don't believe you. I'm going to try to find it because I think cars inherently exist. So the way I'm going to try to find it is search everywhere that it could possibly be. Like if you've, lost something, or if you're looking for something, you search everywhere that it could possibly be. Well, what are the possibilities, those places that it could possibly be? Well, it could possibly be within its parts or outside of its parts. And when you start to try to investigate under ultimate analysis if this thing inherently exists within its parts or outside of its parts, you come to the conclusion that it's not findable under ultimate analysis. If this thing inherently exists, it should be findable within its parts, something that's within the parts or separate from the parts. And the entailment of emptiness is that if you cannot find this inherently existent thing within its parts or outside of its parts, this inherently existent thing doesn't exist. So inherent existence doesn't exist. So this is the entailment of emptiness. If this inherently existent object isn't findable, inherently existent car isn't findable within its parts or outside of its parts, then an inherently existent car doesn't exist. So here, when we're looking at the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, we can apply that same formula to everything in the Heart Sutra. Are the Four Noble Truths, do they inherently exist? Does this hand inherently exist? Does the self of person inherently exist? Does the self of phenomena inherently exist? Does form, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness, the five aggregates, inherently exist? And we apply this mode of reasoning. And then we can apply the other modes of reasoning. Is it inherently arisen from self? Is it inherently arisen from other? Is it inherently arisen from both? Is it causeless? And we can start to get a notion of what the Heart Sutra is talking about. The Heart Sutra is saying that nothing has objective existence. Nothing can be established inherently from its own side. Nothing holds itself up. Everything is subjective. But we have to be able to say that things exist externally while positing them to be subjectively existent. And not having any ness from their own side, not having any defining characteristics from the side of the object that establishes it from its own side that's separate from a designating consciousness. So the object of negation is this object that exists by way of its own character, separate from this designating consciousness, that this object that within its basis of designation exists. This designated object, car, exists within its basis of designation. So this is the mistaken idea. And according to the Buddha says that from this mistaken idea that we think things have this concrete sense about them from their own side, and we don't, and it's not like we walk around as normal individuals saying, I think that inherently exists, that inherently exists. It's just our experience. It's just our senses, even because of the obstructions to omniscience, are apprehending things as inherently existent. We've just been patterned. They've just been firmly supplanted within our continuum since beginningless time, this mayonnaise over our seeing that makes us see everything as inherently existent. And as soon as things have concreteness to them, myself and other things, then I can assign, oh, this makes me feel good, this makes me feel bad. I start to value evaluate and add value to things and say that, okay, this thing inherently exists. So I find that pleasant, that unpleasant, et cetera, et cetera. I engage in this conceptual kind of construction of inappropriate attention, it's called technically, that where I say this thing inherently exists. Okay, so I find that to be pleasant. I find that to be unpleasant. I find that to be neutral. And then my mind gets dragged towards it when I like it. My mind wants to punch it when I hate it. So then I do so with my action. My mind reacts because my afflictions of attachment see this thing as pleasant and then make my karma run towards it and do silly things. My inappropriate attention sees this thing as unpleasant, and then aversion's created, and I want to punch it, and I act in weird ways. And then that action creates samsara over and over and over again, and I'm thrust into this set of aggregates, these appropriated aggregates beyond my control over and over and over again because of karma, contaminated karma's afflictions and their active seeds, and really coming from the self-grasping ignorance. So if the self-grasping ignorance is that which gives rise to the mess, then its antidote is really, really important. And this isn't an antidote that we learn. I mean, I've been studying almost 30 years, and I cannot say I've realized the object of negation, because if you realize the object of negation, you realize emptiness. I haven't realized emptiness. I don't have this wisdom that's arisen, but I've analyzed it enough to say, this makes sense. This stuff really, really makes sense. And it intrigues me. And I notice the more and more and more I analyze it, the less my mind is fluttery, is so disturbed as the years go by. And it's not because of aging. I can see that the disturbance in my mind, because of the small amounts of bodhicitta meditation and emptiness meditation I've been able to do, has lessened it, like as a byproduct of the practices, as it says will happen. So I encourage you all to engage in these practices, but don't be impatient. Don't think, oh, something needs to happen overnight. If it doesn't happen overnight, then it's obviously not working. If you engage in systematic studies and you engage in effort for a long period of time, and you are around qualified teachers who give you the correct information, and you apply these formulas, and these teachers are good, you're going to see, if you stick around, nothing, with a great result has ever been easy. It's not like, oh, I want to get this really incredible thing and I just snap my fingers and it's easy in life. I want a PhD, snap my fingers and get a PhD. You have to put in work. You have to put in effort. But if this stuff makes sense to you, the effort's really worth it, because it will produce changes within your mind that you'll say, okay, this is a discovery I'm having. This isn't something someone's telling me is possible. And this is when the Dharma begins to really seep into you, when you can start to say, there's things that I'm discovering. And when I say discovering, little things like, oh, I want to actively abandon killing. I want to actively abandon stealing. I want to actively abandon sexual misconduct. I want to actively abandon lying. These are the kinds of things that start to allow your mind, because the first higher training is ethics, to loosen up enough to be able to concentrate. And this is, what we'll talk about more. But let's get to the Heart Sutra. Again, explicitly talking about the absence of inherent existence of all phenomena. And just one last thing about when Jeffrey Hopkins was Jeffrey Hopkins was in Tibet, there was an older monk there who he was just really worn out. And he said, you still have your fervor, to Gen Jeffrey. The old monk said to him, he said, it's good. I can see you still really are into this. You've still got enthusiasm about this. I lost my fervor. And then Gen Jeffrey said something really, really profound. He said that you better start applying these teachings, this intellectual material, to your mind, and practicing and meditating and making it part of you, Because if you don't start having some kind of realizations, you will lose your fervor and you will give up. So I really encourage everyone to not only study, studying is the most important thing, obviously, in the beginning, but also engage in techniques, even if it's a few minutes a day, to try to calm your mind down. Try to start engaging in the causes for shamatha. Try to start making it so that your mind becomes realistic enough to absorb this material. And then it starts to kind of help each other. Your mind's calmer so you can read better. You've read more so you know how to calm your mind down more. But don't make this an inactive state where once a week you're just hearing me yammer away, or once a week you're hearing another teacher talk, and then you're, maybe studying a little bit because you have a quiz, but not using it as information to change your mind, because that's the only thing this stuff is designed for, to change our minds from the state that it's in right now into a perfect state. There's nothing else to do. Shantideva says that may I day and night figure out how to stop non-virtues that lead to suffering. May I day and night, Gontan Dembe Drome says, figure out how to leave virtuous imprints every moment in my mind. And that's going to take a calmer mind. That's going to take a wiser mind. I'm going to need to know what virtuous imprints are. And then I'm going to need to know how to uncontaminate those virtuous karmas. And that's with emptiness. So I need the ripening paths to be able to move the things out of the way so that I can get to the emptiness, and get to emptiness as a bodhisattva, so that I'm on my way to those grounds where I go through, get rid of the afflictive obstructions, and then on the 8th, 9th, 10th bodhisattva grounds, get rid of the obstructions to omniscience and achieve the resultant ground of the most reliable guide in the universe. The transformation into the most reliable guide in the universe, the same transformation that Buddha Shakyamuni did, motivated by compassion. Going back to the way we started this class, our motivation should be, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard once. The Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha, monks, and a great gathering of the Sangha, bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajaparamita, saw in this way, he saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita should see in this way, seeing the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness. Emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form. Form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the 3 times by means of Prajaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajaparamita, the path of accumulation, the mantra of great insight, the path of preparation, the unsurpassed mantra, the path of seeing, the unequal mantra, the path of meditation, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth since there is no deception. The mantra that calms all suffering, the path of no more learning, should be known as truth since there is no deception. The Prajaparamita mantra is said in this way. Teata Om, Gate, path of accumulation, Gate, path of preparation, Paragate, path of seeing, Parasamgate, path of meditation, Bodhisoha, path of no more learning. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train the profound Prajaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family. Thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Gala jube ni jo damba ne ngu she du chu nga yi du do jen du ba bu lama yi bu shen zi ne sun kan jo son la sha tse lo aga samara ja shandara samara be aga samara. Aga samara jashana rasamara yabe diato gate gate paragate parasangate bodhi soha papa concha sonji gaye dembe doji she lobo doji mebo doji shewa doji dragi baji metu beji danji shedin gorye zoha Kirin don jaji shewa dan midun ni bejan dan de wa dan dun baju jin bun zun zun joji dashi de jan den da de show. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Sanjay Jodan Zaji Janan La Janjo Badu Danyi Jazuji Dagi Chushe Ji Bezonanji Drola Benje Zanje Dubasho Sanjay Jodan Zaji Janan La Janjo Badu Danyi Jazuji Dagi Chushe Ji Bezonanji Drola Benje Zanje Dubasho Sanjay Jodan Zaji Janan La Janjo Badu Danyi Jazuji Dagi Chushe Ji Bezonanji Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. Okay, great to see everybody. So wonderful to be here tonight. His Holiness the Dalai Lama will be coming on this evening, or this evening at midnight, which is way past my bedtime. But it's so wonderful that we're going to be doing the Avalokiteshvara blessing, prayer blessing this evening, I believe. So I would encourage you all, when we can see with our eyes live, Avalokiteshvara, Buddha of compassion, Dalai Lama, the wish-fulfilling jewel. Anytime you have the opportunity to see such a holy being live, I encourage you all to do it. And if it's not realistic, the playback is there, and you can watch it in the morning or watch it whenever is possible for you to do it. But I really, really encourage you to all, please continue to pray that your obstacles remove to being able to see His Holiness in front of you, because His Holiness the Dalai Lama is Chenrezig Buddha. And Chenrezig Buddha abides in so many different ways, abides in a Sambhogakaya, abides in a Dharmakaya, and we want to be able to have the karma to be like the lake that reflects the moon, that doesn't dry up, so that we can continue to see His Holiness. And may we make aspirations that in all our lives we're never separated from these pure beings, and that we're able to be able to achieve the final goal they've achieved, so that we can then aid them in benefiting all sentient beings. And we make these aspirations. So tonight, once again, we're talking about Lama Tsongkhapa's foundation of all good qualities, the source of all my good, as it's entitled in our particular translation. And it's just such an incredible 14 stanzas that we're able to see all of the stages of the path to Buddhahood that we're all going to need to traverse in order to become enlightened, in order to achieve the goals that each and every one of us have on our daily lives. We want to be happy as much as possible and want to not suffer. That's all we try to do every day. But unfortunately, we've never really had the right recipe to achieve those goals. And now we do have that recipe, and that recipe isn't something that we can do some of and not do other parts of. This is a recipe that all of us will have to completely engage in without leaving any of it out. So we might as well get started now. If since beginningless time we've had to suffer, and we've never wanted to suffer, since beginningless time we haven't had states of happiness that have been secure, and that's all we've ever wanted. And if all we've ever wanted has never occurred, maybe we should start doing something differently. And luckily, because of the kindness of the Buddhas, we have a recipe that will show us how to achieve exactly what we want. And these are the stages of the path to enlightenment. In 14 stanzas, Lama Tsongkhapa is able to show us everything contained in the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, as well as the great treatise on the stage of the tantric path to enlightenment. And if we know everything in those two texts, and we know the meaning of everything in those two texts, then we know exactly how to go from where we are right now to the completion stage of highest yoga tantra to become a Buddha, so that we can achieve that final state that we're all looking for, which is complete freedom from suffering and complete happiness without a cap on it, without a change to it, and a reliability that we all really want. We wish we could be more reliable. We wish so many times in our lives we knew exactly what to say. When someone's in front of me in pain, and a lot of times now, many of Rinpoche's students, have a lot of situations, and I just wish I knew exactly what to say that would ease that pain, or that would make that pain transform into the path. But I'm limited, I'm handicapped because of the self-cherishing attitude that I have, the afflictive obstructions, the obstructions to omniscience, all of these veils. I'm so limited. And I see just in my ordinary life wanting to be less limited. And imagine if I just knew exactly what to say to every single being, including the worm in my garden, how to speak worm language, what I could do for that worm in the worm's language, heart language, to help him or her. Maybe it's not him or her, help them to become enlightened, and that state, as Pabunka says, that once I really realize these teachings, when I see a worm, when I see a bug, I'll think mama. And that's just such a beautiful thing. Imagine that if that was the way that your mind worked. Maybe your mind works like that. So I guess you could all be Buddhas. Dharmakirti says I can only judge my own mind based on what the Buddhist Sutra says. Don't be so sure about anyone else's mind but yourself. So let's begin. The source of Pabunka Rinpoche says, let's break this text into 4 categories. First category is finding a Lama, and how to serve and rely on that teacher, etc. So the first category deals with the first stanza. The second category is, what do you do once you have a teacher? And then we see that, that goes all the way up to, the 12th stanza. And then the third category deals with making aspirations that all obstacles are removed and so forth on the path, and that, never be separated from good practitioners on the path and so forth. The third category, to have all adverse circumstances that could prevent us from succeeding removed, and stanza 13. And then stanza 14 dealing with an aspiration to be able to, in all future lives, be protected by the source of all of our good, be protected by lamas, bringing it back to that first stanza, recognizing that the source of everything good, the source of all of my excellent qualities, is a qualified teacher. And then the last prayer is making a prayer to never be separated from qualified teachers, and to be able to achieve the stages of all the grounds and all of the paths, to become Vajradhara, to achieve the state where the afflictive obstructions, the obstructions to omniscience, have been removed through a process of the perfection and resultant vehicle, in this case, through the teachings for beings of 3 capacities, the teachings shared in common with beings of small and medium capacity, and the teachings for beings of great capacity in the perfection vehicle and in the Vajra vehicle. So this is the tantric path. So when we look at Mahayana, we divide it into the perfection vehicle and the Tantrayana. Both Mahayana, though, not 2 separate things, both under the umbrella of Mahayana. So the first category, so the very root of the path, which is how to take a Lama and serve him or her properly. So thought I probably should look at the text. The source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to him in the proper way is the very root of the path, and grant me to serve and follow him with all my strength and reverence. So we can say him or her, but in Lama Tsongkhapa's case, we know that Lama Tsongkhapa's teachers were males, but male, female, everyone has Buddha nature. So teachers aren't specific to male. And there's the only reason you would use gender specificity here. When we worked on meditation on emptiness, we made everything gender neutral, because when it was written, the yogi in the beginning, if you know meditation on emptiness, is he does that and he does that. and we turned it into a plural, yogis, they. But in this case, I see a reason for the gender specificity because Lama Tsongkhapa's teachers were male, just as an aside. Just because we're all really trying to figure out how to present the Dharma in a way that is inclusive, because that's how the Buddha taught it. And culturally, things can become exclusive when that's not the intent of the Buddha, and we have to make sure that we're following with the intent of the Buddha. So bless me first to realize that, so that's the first category. The next category, what do I do once I've found a Lama? And we know in the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment, Lama Tsongkhapa tells us about this life of leisure and opportunity, and then hands us out brochures like, this is the teachings for beings of small capacity. It's the teachings for beings of medium capacity. This is the teachings for beings of great capacity. Hands us all these flyers out to tell us what we could do with this great life, and then goes to impermanence and death. So if you know the Lamrim Chebo, you know what I'm talking about. That's kind of how he does it. He does the rely on the teacher, and then teaches meditation and dispels misconceptions, then life of leisure and opportunity, then hands out flyers on the three beings of three capacities, and then then says, but you're gonna die. You better get cooked, better get cracking, you better get moving. So here it says, bless me first to realize that the X of life of leisure I found just this once is ever so hard to find and ever so valuable. Grant me then to wish and never stop to wish that I could take its essence night and day. So we learned in the previous classes when we were just going over this that it's ever so hard to find, ever so valuable. It's valuable because from this very basis we can become Buddhas. We know that Milarepa in one lifetime was able to achieve the state of union, the state of complete Buddhahood. And we know it was from a mind, a body, a human basis just like ours. From this human basis, this life of leisure and opportunity, the 8 leisures and 10 opportunities. Lama Tsongkhapa just mentions life of leisure here because in the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment, there's a doubt that arises on the outer circumstances for the 10 opportunities, that all 10 aren't complete because Buddha's not here. But life of leisure, we certainly have for the 8 leisures. So you can study into that. It's hard to find because the numbers are difficult. There's many more beings in the lower realms than the higher realms. If we look at the number of beings that will go from the higher realms to the lower realms, there's number of atoms in a universe. We look at the number of beings that will go from the higher realms to the higher realms. It's like the atoms between the fingers or on a fingernail, depending on what text you're looking at. We look at the number of beings that will go from the lower realms to the lower realms. It's like atoms in the universe, lower realms to the higher realms, atoms between the tips of the finger or on a fingernail. So we know that the numbers are chances of us being human are very, very difficult in terms of just the statistics. And then if we look at the difficulty in terms of examples, we see the tortoise coming up every 100 years or 1,000 years, depending on the story. And there's a yolk floating around in a vast ocean, and he or she happens to pop his or her head through it. This is how rare it is that we could achieve such a thing. And that we have to have these incredible stainless aspirational prayers and ethical behavior and a practice of the other perfections in order to have obtained this human basis. And we have it just this once, ever so meaningful and ever so hard to find, ever so valuable. It's valuable, but we can do something that's so incredible with it that we never imagined we could do. We must do something valuable with it. And when would we do something valuable with it? Day and night. Because as we said, Guntan Jayan says that we want to figure out how to put virtuous imprints every moment into our mind. And that's day and night. There's no other times than day and night. And the bodhisattvas, once they generate the mind that aspire to enlightenment, are always generating virtue, whether they're distracted, it says if they're drunk, if they're going to the bathroom, if they're sleeping, whatever they're doing, they're always engaging in virtue. So they're really taking the essence day and night. And this is why we must, through the 7-point cause and effect, or equalizing, exchanging self with others, or a combination of both together, generate this mind or something like this mind, because His Holiness says if we have this mind at death, we will not go to the lower realms. If we can generate this mind that wants to become a Buddha for the sake of others, this loving, compassionate mind, this compassionate mind that's so important at the beginning, middle, and end, if we can generate this at the time of death, then we won't go to the lower realms. And we know that the lower realms are no place for us to be, because escaping from them so hard. And we have this chance right now. So now here's the pitch about death. My body and the life in it are fleeting as the bubbles in the sea froth of a wave. Bless me first thus to recall the death that will destroy me soon, and help me find sure knowledge that after I've died, the things I've done, the white or black, and what those deeds will bring to me, follow always close behind, as certain as my shadow. Grant me then ever to be careful to stop the slightest wrong of the many wrongs we do, and try to carry out instead each and every good of the many that we may. So here we're dealing with the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity, the teachings where we see the reliance on the teacher, a life of leisure and opportunity, death and impermanence, reflecting on future lives, and we find refuge, and we find karma, and we find how to apply the four opponent powers. So all those topics are contained within this set of teachings for beings of small capacity. And we know that here we find also the teachings for achieving high status, and the abstaining from the 10 non-virtues, engaging in the 16 virtues as it talks about in Nagarjuna's Precious Garland. And we're not only trying to achieve this high status so that we can have higher realm rebirths, so we have opportunities to practice, and we have the best possible kind of environment and physical statures to help others and so forth, but we're also then creating things that we can uncontaminate through the grounds and paths, and make into the beautiful aspects of the Buddha. So these small scope teachings have a grander, longer run point to be made. But here we're wishing to be free from the lower realms of cyclic existence. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. And when we look at the medium stages of the path to enlightenment, there's a measure of the attitude that's arisen. And it's pretty much the same thing that's in the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, the measure of the attitude of a person of small capacity. Here's the mirror of the Dharma. I think I'm an advanced practitioner. I can't believe there's small scope practitioners out there. Well, let's see whether or not I've even achieved the realization within the small scope. And this is the measure. How would we know if this had happened? What would be occurring in my mind if I had realized the small scope that serves as the foundation for the medium scope? And the medium scope serves as the foundation, and the small and medium scope serve as the foundation for the great scope. If I'm a Mahayanist, have I realized the step before the step that's necessary for me to have in place to actually realize renunciation, that has to be in place for me to realize bodhicitta? So here's the measure if I'm attached to this life, and if I'm a spiritual practitioner, or if I'm attached to this life. Because if I'm attached to this life, as Sachen Konga Nipo says, I'm not a spiritual practitioner. So what's the measure? Where's the line of demarcation between attached to this life and spiritual practitioner? Previously, you had an uncontrived interest in this life only, and your interest in future lives was just a vague understanding elicited by the words of others. Once their ranking has been switched so that future lives have become the main interest, and this life nothing but a byproduct, the attitude of lesser persons has developed. As this nevertheless needs to be destabilized, you should strive to train in it even after it has arisen. So even if you think you've got this mind, you've got to be careful, because it can slip through your fingers. This is a very low level, high level, low level. We think that we're these great practitioners, but when we look at what the small scope says we would be thinking like, we say, oh, is this life incidental? That's what the word that's used in the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. Here they use byproduct. Like, this life's cooked. There's just a rising of our karmas are happening. And what we're planting in our mind right now, there's different karmas. There's karma that ripens in this life. If it's super, super powerful, special kinds of karmas, don't usually create those. karmas that ripen our immediate next life, and then karmas that ripen like millions of lifetimes later. So we're writing a story that'll be read later. We're planting seeds for future experiences. The experiences we're having now are from seeds that were planted previously. So someone who's wise is recognizing suffering that's occurring and saying, I really dislike this. What did that come from? Came from non-virtue. Then, like Shantideva says, may I figure out how to abandon non-virtue day and night, the cause of all my miseries. This is what we're trying to do. We're not trying to keep ourselves from being happy and just, oh, don't go do that. I know you really want to do that. We're trying to figure out how to make a mind that doesn't have that push-pull, that disturbance, that just hum of disturbance at all times. And many of us came to Buddhism with this question of why? Why can't I have lasting states of happiness? Why does everything that I love seem to change? Why do the people that I care about get ripped from my life? And then when you come to look at what's taught in this next scope, the medium scope, you find out exactly, because you're in cyclic existence. So then let's move on to what that means. So cyclic existence, we know when we look at the wheel of life, the 6 realms of cyclic existence, Vasubandhu's Abhidharmakosha talks about 5 realms of cyclic existence because he puts demigods and gods together into one realm. Chef's choice. But so then now we move on to the medium scope. So this first scope is saying, hey, I want to abandon hell, hungry ghost, animal rebirth. We see the animals around us. We know that they have immense amount of suffering. We can imagine that if at the time of death and not, there's going to be a projecting karma that happens that's going to throw us into another realm. And my teacher, Umzala Geshe Aga, says, look at when you watch Animal Planet and you look at an animal who's being eaten and you see the lion bite the elk or whatever animal, you see the animal turn back in such anger at that moment where it's being eaten alive. That's the moment. That's the projecting karma. That's the state of mind that an animal kind of has a lot of times in their lives. And throughout their lives, all they've done is eat, sleep, kill, eat, sleep, kill, eat, sleep, kill. Sleep, kill, eat, more like that, right? Because they have to kill to eat in most cases. So getting out of the lower realms of cyclic existence is very hard. And if we have this right now, this state that we're in, and we can look around and see the lower realms with our own eyes, and we can begin to have some faith in karma. It says in the beginning of the Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, between faith and wisdom, wisdom's the chief, but faith is its prerequisite. Faith in starting to study karma and its results in these small scope teachings really gets us to say, wow, this sort of thing is possible. And if there's, 100 years ago, nobody had ideas of what was going on in the rainforest in terms of all these weird creatures you could never imagine, because we didn't have, in Connecticut, if I lived here, I wouldn't know about 100 years ago these strange creatures probably, and wouldn't believe they existed. Keep an open mind and believe that if what the Buddha is saying is true, there are states of suffering you can't even imagine. And Shantideva says in the Dalai Lama's commentary on Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life that Umzala Aga is teaching me almost every day, says we can get an idea of what that suffering might be like when we have a wound and hot water is poured on it. We can imagine there's varying degrees of suffering that can occur in terms of heat. And just imagine if that was all we had, just that, and that's all we had. Imagine, though, that it could be even worse. Imagine, we've probably never had a wound and then taken boiling water or boiling copper and poured it on it. And if we can experience in our own lives something that scalds us and hurts so bad, couldn't we think there's something worse? We can see with our own eyes in places where there's so much war, so much poverty, no food, starvation. We can see this in our own world, even though we can't imagine, experiencing such a thing because we haven't, but we can see that others do. So we know there's worse sufferings than we've experienced. So we use these as indicators to tell us that we really, really want to get out. And when we look at the lower realms of cyclic existence, there's nothing there for us. And we look at the suffering of suffering, that's mainly we're just trying to get out of every day. So badly we're trying, and that's all that's really going on at all times in those lower realms. Just plague the suffering of suffering, just that manifest suffering going on and on and on. But then we get to the medium scope and we see that, and I think that's why we came to Buddhism. So it's not like a lot of convincing that the higher realms, because we're in the higher realms, are plagued with suffering too. We didn't come usually to Buddhism because we felt like, oh, my mind is really disturbed by the lower realms. No, our mind is disturbed because our mind is disturbed. And I'm in a human basis. We come to learn that the human basis is a higher realm when we study Buddhism, but we didn't show up here because we were worried about something other than what we were experiencing right now. So it's not too far away to realize the medium scope, because we showed up at Buddhism with a problem that the medium scope says, yeah, you were right. Bless me to perceive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them. They cannot be trusted. They are the door to every pain I have. Grant me then to strive instead for the happiness of freedom. Grant that these pure thoughts may lead me to be watchful and to recall what I should be doing. Grant me to give the greatest care to make the vows of morality the essence of my practice. They are the root of Buddhist teaching. So we see this carryover of morality. We know that in order to be free from the lower realms of cyclic existence, we need this morality. We need to abstain from non-virtuous activities. But in order to move through the pathway to get to the ability to see emptiness directly, which is the only liberating path, the only way that we can abandon the afflictive obstructions in this case, the aim of this case is to get rid of that which binds us to cyclic existence, is by engaging in a pathway that starts with a pure morality that serves as a foundation for our concentration to be matured, and then our concentration to be able to be united with insight. So we have to engage in the three highest higher trainings, and the foundation of the three highest higher trainings is morality. When we think about what the three highest higher trainings are, we know they're ethics, concentration, and wisdom, and they relate to the Vinaya basket, the Sutra basket, and the Abhidharma basket. And the example that Khenser Geshe Wandak always gave about the necessity of having all three of these things, he used the example of cutting down a tree. And here cutting the tree down is like cutting the root of ignorance, cutting that which binds us to cyclic existence. If someone wants to cut down a tree, they need a very stable body. So you need a stable body if you're going to cut a tree. And this is compared to the highest higher training in ethics. One needs to first have the kind of conscientiousness, mindfulness, and introspection related to physical and verbal behaviors. And we know that in the Vinaya and in the individual liberation vows, the Buddha taught about abstaining from physical and verbal behaviors, and embedded a lot of the teachings around that. And then the mind, the mindfulness and introspection is then turned towards the mental behaviors. So we begin with this basis that's the body, that's the Vinaya, that's the abstaining from non-virtues, and applying introspection and mindfulness and a conscientiousness to our behaviors, our verbal and physical behaviors. And then not only do we need a firm body if we want to cut down a tree, not only do we need ethics if we want to be liberated, we also need a good arm. So the good arm that does the cutting is compared to the highest higher training and concentration. So we need a stable body and a good arm if we want to cut down a tree. Likewise, if we want to be liberated, we need stable ethics and we need stable concentration. We need the training in the Vinaya basket and training in the Sutra basket. But no matter how stable your body is and how strong your arm is, you're not going to cut a tree, no matter how much you hit it. You don't have that which can cut the tree down yet. You have factors that are conducive to cutting a tree, but you haven't created that which can actually cut the tree down. So even if you're as ethical as you can be and your mind as calm as can be and you have shamatha and you have formless peak of existence, formless realm meditation, you don't have that which will cut the root of cyclic existence. You don't have the final tool that these two things support that's necessary to cut the tree, to cut the root of cyclic existence. So you have now at this point the highest higher training in ethics, the highest higher training in concentration. You have at this point a strong body and a good arm. And you're trying to, in the case of the strong body and good arm, cut down a tree, but you still can't. And you're trying to, in the case of the training in ethics and concentration, become liberated, but you still can't. What you need to add to this now is some sort of saw. So now if you have a stable body and a good arm and a saw, you can cut away and you will cut that tree down. 100% can cut that tree down. Any of those factors are missing, you can't cut the tree down. Likewise, you have the highest higher training in ethics and concentration. If you add the highest higher training in wisdom to that mix, you can then cut the root of cyclic existence. If you're missing any among those three highest higher trainings, you cannot cut the root of cyclic existence. But you will not be able to develop any of the higher points of the three highest higher trainings if you put them in an order of ethics, concentration, and wisdom, if you don't have the prior foundations. So we see, this is why Lama Tsongkhapa says, the vows of morality, the essence of my practice, they are the root of Buddha's teachings. Because we know if we don't want to go to the lower realms, we have to engage in ethics. If we want to be able to achieve concentration, we have to engage in ethics. And then our ethics become even purer and purer and become the ethics which work for others as we become Mahayanists and if we want to become a Buddha. So ethical behavior is indispensable, and we see that they're the root of Buddha's teachings. So here, what is a mind that we would want? What kind of mind are we trying to generate that would work, that would start to create momentum? So we definitely want to be out of the lower realms of cyclic existence. And if we apply the definition of what renunciation is to, in Lama Tsongkhapa's three principal paths, it says day and night seeking transcendent liberation. If we apply that to the small scope, we could say day and night wanting to be free from the lower realms of cyclic existence. Do I have that realization coupled with this other idea that's just, a switch that has the main interest be of future lives? Have I decided that that's the way I should be? These are the things we ask ourselves. This is the mirror of the Dharma. This is how we engage in not self-deception. Self-deception is just going to create us suffering. It may feel good, but it's the kind of thing that is just like every other non-virtuous happiness that we engage in. A non-virtuous action that causes us some sort of short happiness that we engage in. It's just setting us up for the suffering in the future. So liberation is freedom from bondage. What are we bound to? Our contaminated karmas and our afflictions bind us in cyclic existence. Through the power of these two, the aggregates are reborn in one of the three realms, such as the desire realm, form, or formless realm, as one of the 5 or 6 types of beings, such as gods, and in one of the 4 birthplaces, such as a womb. So when we look at the different birthplaces, we have immaculate birth, birth from the womb, birth from heat and moisture, and birth from an egg. So these are the 4 types of birthplaces you can look up. This is the meaning of bondage. Therefore, freedom from this is liberation. The wish to attain that is the mind striving for liberation. So when we talk about renunciation, most people think it's, oh, I've got to give up something. Yeah, suffering. That's what you've decided to give up on. That doesn't sound like what renunciation is usually presented as. I must renounce. I've got to give up this. I must renounce that. I got to give up that. No. Here, Lama Tsongkhapa is telling us the mind intent on liberation, the mind that is intent on renouncing suffering, that says, I want to definitely emerge from suffering. I want to definitely emerge from the 8 types of suffering. I want to definitely emerge from birth, aging, sickness, and death. emerge from being separated from the present, meeting with the unpleasant, not getting what I want, and the suffering of the appropriated aggregates. I want to emerge from the suffering of uncertainty, the suffering of insatiability, the suffering of being reborn, the suffering of shucking off bodies, the suffering of going from the high realms to the low realms, the suffering of being alone and having no companions, the suffering of change, the pervasive compounded suffering. I want to be free from those things. That's what the mind that aspires to enlightenment. Day and night, I just want to be free from those things. So what do I have to do? What am I doing in this moment to be free from suffering? That's the most wise way to behave. Think about this. If we don't like suffering, it should be a sign that we shouldn't engage in non-virtue. Whenever we have these horrible different sufferings that occur, the 8 sufferings, 6 sufferings, 3 sufferings, suffering of birth, most of us don't remember, but mothers do. So when we think about these things and don't want to have the sufferings connected with them, we think about being forced into a set of aggregates over and over again. Forced. Someone's forcing you to do something. Your contaminated karmas and afflictions are forcing you, driven by self-grasping ignorance, into something. You're being forced to do something that you didn't choose. That's misery. Lack of freedom is misery. So wanting to not be miserable day and night is renunciation, saying, I don't want to be miserable and I'm going to do something about it, seeking the state which is a separation from that misery. And the Buddha in the first turning of the wheel of Dharma was so kind to come and teach the Four Noble Truths. He said that this is the superior truth of suffering, this is the superior truth of origin, this is the superior truth of cessation, and this is the superior truth of path. We are so blessed to know this. And he taught all the varieties of suffering for us to be able to understand how from a practical perspective, we would realize these truths like, oh my gosh, suffering is horrible. I do not want this. Why am I having this? The origin of suffering. Oh, it's caused by this. Oh, it can end. How do I end it? So the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths in terms of practice. And we can see how the first set of truths shows us how we're bound to cyclic existence. And the second 2 truths shows us how we're unbound. Liberation is freedom from bondage. So this is how we're unbound, is through engaging in the truth of path that leads to the unbound state of cessation. Why are we bound? Because we have self-grasping ignorance. The self-grasping ignorance is abandoned, then that which gives rise to cyclic existence goes away. So we'll talk about more in the future, but the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha said, this is the superior truth of suffering, this is the superior truth of origin, this is the superior truth of cessation, this is the superior truth of path. Suffering is to be identified, origin is to be abandoned, cessation is to be achieved, and path is to be relied upon. And then the Buddha said something curious. There is no suffering to identify, no origin to abandon, no cessation to achieve, and no path to rely upon. And that can be interpreted, the last thing I'll say, in 2 different ways, depending on if we look at it in terms of the target audience of the Four Noble Truths, who were the Vaibhashika and Sautrantika practitioners. The target audience there, they thought that it meant that when you achieve cessation, there is no cessation to achieve, there's no suffering to identify, origin to abandon, or path to rely upon. But if we interpret it according to Prasangika, there's no inherently existent suffering, no inherently existent origin, no inherently existent cessation, and no inherently existent path. So, wow, we're fortunate to have this information. I hope this has been of some benefit to you this evening. I have no skill, as Shantideva said, at the art of explaining things, and I don't have this vast deep knowledge like beings like Geshe Dorje Damdula has, or Umzala Geshe Aga has, or Khensa Geshe Wandak has, or His Holiness the Dalai Lama has, but I've been given little morsels of information, and Khensa Geshe Wandak Rinpoche asked me to share them with you before he passed away, so I feel so just happy that I fulfilled his wishes and to the best of my ability. And any mistakes I made, I apologize. And may they, first we'll do the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. Now we'll do the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. We really must practice and study the teachings shared in common with beings of small and medium capacity. So many people have a tendency to move to the second volume and third volume of the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment and feel like, oh, I know what suffering is. And I understand that. And you miss the jewel that allows you to actually generate bodhicitta. You miss the mental basis that will be necessary for you to really generate compassion, really generate love, really understand others, and really be reliable. So I encourage everyone to use these, as Pabonka Rinpoche says, as guidelines to realize step by step, and don't be satisfied with correctly assuming consciousness, because that can just change, that can waver. You can go back to wrong view if you're just assuming something. Realize these teachings through signs and reasoning and engage in analytical meditation, as Lama Tsongkhapa says to do right from the outset of the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment. Right after Lama Tsongkhapa presents relying on a teacher, he presents this idea that we need analysis in our meditation, and that meditation isn't just single pointed, it's also analytical meditation, where we tie we put a subject in the middle of a circle and we look at it in every single different way we possibly can. We should take each of these topics: reliance upon a teacher, life of leisure and opportunity, death and impermanence. We should take all of these topics and analyze them to the point where we realize them within our mind in a way that it says that it's measured in this text. Any mistakes that I made, I apologize. I in no way intended to make them. If I misspoke, this can happen in a live discourse, and may they be purified by this mantra of Vajrasattva. Om Benza Sattva Samayana Aya Benza Sattva. Sveno Bhajishta Dita Me Bava Sutta Gaya Me Vasa Bhagaya Me Vanarak Me Vasa Vasiri Me Vrajasava Kamasuji Me Gijam Shuyan Guru Om Ha Bhagavan Sarvatata Gata Benza Bhava Samaya Sava Ahum Fate. May we always be protected by Paul and Lama. Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Jo Rama Tunja Kala Rajamo Ramo Chadaja Tunjo Rulu Rulu Om Jo Om. Now we'll do dedication prayer. Again, I want to thank you all for listening and for allowing me to, week after week, continue to give these teachings. They're really the nectar that all of us can apply to our minds. It's an individual kind of journey, and all of us just have to take it. It's our minds that have to be matured. And they're all just right here with us at every moment. And every moment we can use to do something positive. And that's what's so beautiful about this. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase forevermore. That incredible prayer, bodhicitta prayer, we find encompasses the entire text, Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. I encourage you all to learn about that. Kuna Lama, through Zapatra Rinpoche, taught this, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama's commentary shares this, and it's just so beautiful and incredible to be able to see this. In the heavenly realm, the long life prayer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama, may we always have all obstacles removed. May we have all of the things in our mind go away that keep us from having in all our lives a connection with Chenrezig, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. In the heavenly realm of Tibet, surrounded by a chain of snow mountains, you are the source of all benefit and help for beings. All-powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. And a prayer of supplication for Namgyal Khensa Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, written by me a year after his passing. And also I supplicate to Geshe Lobsang Gompo Rinpoche, who was so kind to me to help begin teaching me the keys to logic and reasoning and debate so many years ago in 2000, to be able to then be here today understanding these things little bit by little bit. It's so true that the collected topics in logic and reasoning, like the first Dalai Lama, I believe, said, is the key to opening all of the teachings. And may Jeffrey Hopkins and Geshe Lobsang Gompo Rinpoche, may they all swiftly return. And Khensa Geshe Wandak Rinpoche. A complex yogi poses as a simple monk. Homage to Khensa Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible, to your pure body, speech, and mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Om Ah Om, Om Ah Om, Om Ah Om. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Atisha, who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of three capacities. Now that sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood the sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries with his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It's by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all of our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. Check. I know I have all of those problems that I need to reverse. How about you? Have a good week.